Hey, welcome back, everybody. Dr. Greg Eckel and What the Health. Today's topic is choosing humanity over dollars, shifting the focus from profits to people. I have John Gusty and Dr. Jeremy Ayres on with me today. I want to give you both a little bit of a background for our listeners and viewers. For John, over 30 years in the entertainment industry, working behind the curtain for some of music's biggest names. John turned his attention to health and wellness in an effort to help his wife heal from what was originally diagnosed as multiple sclerosis. He soon realized that the same deceit and profit motive that plagued the entertainment media was even worse inside the medical industrial complex. As a devout agorist and champion of individuality, he now devotes his time to producing content that celebrates the spirit of sovereignty in all aspects of life. Here. And Dr. Jeremy Ayres, co-author of The Red Pill Revolution, passionately uncovers deception in the medical industrial complex and its links to pharma and food industries. Holding titles like Senior Practitioner of Physical Medicine and Naturopractic Consultant, he merges chiropractic, osteopathy, and naturopathy, trained as a UK osteopath. He's an international natural health educator, guides numerous individuals toward natural healing. His mission involves blending Eastern wisdom with Western science, challenging medical manipulation, and advocating for holistic well-being to create a healthier world. Welcome aboard, you guys.
Oh, thank you, Greg. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Dr. Greg. Great to be here.
Now, one component. Now, I picked this out: choosing humanity over dollars, shifting the focus from profits to people. I think we are well aligned in the natural medicine first aspect. I'm wondering on the union of you two together, and maybe talking about just each of your paths and what brought you both together to kind of help spread this word.
Well, yeah, Jeremy, I'll start this off. So, you'd mentioned in my intro, I'm a devout agorist, which, for those who are not familiar with agorism, it's kind of a subset of anarchy. I'm lifelong anarchist. For those of you that don't know that term beyond what cable news, Fox, CNN, or otherwise tells you, anarchists live by two simple rules: no masters, no servants, which I think we all can agree on. If you disagree with that, then you're into slavery, and congratulations. The other rule is the non-aggression principle, where you do not, it is only appropriate to be physically harmful and aggressive towards another individual if you are just defending your life or the life of someone that you value. So that made a whole lot of sense to me. I got involved in the anarchist community years and years and years ago. There is a wonderful event that takes place every February in Acapulco called Anarchapulco. I was in Anarchapulco one year. I believe it was 2017, maybe 2018. And was just there with just a bunch of beautiful people who were all the wonderful thing about being together with about 3,000 anarchists when you have them all together in one place. The thread going throughout the entire community is sovereignty. And if I expect you to allow me to be me, then I have to allow you to be you. And short of you or I harming each other, not insulting or inconveniencing, but actual harm, I have to allow you to be you, and you have to allow me to be me. And when you take away all of this, just the social crap that most people deal with in that regard, it's really a beautiful experience. I just remember being in one of those conferences, being in a group with a bunch of people, and there were atheists and Christians and Jews and flat earth people and globe earth people and people who thought there were reptilians, and there's all different types of people, but no one was arguing with each other. Everyone was learning from each other. And we've all heard various pieces of the sentiment. There's a little bit of truth in a lot of things, and that so that community really drew me in. And it was in that community that I crossed paths with several like-minded individuals. And one of those like-minded individuals was the gentleman that I share a screen with, Jeremy. Jeremy took a genuine interest in my wife's health and wellness journey. And this was years and years and years ago, and he's never let up. And he continues to be, I think, other than myself, he's probably the one other human being on earth that cares as much about my wife as I do. And that goes a long way in my heart and in my mind. And so I'm forever indebted to him for his tenacity in caring for my girl. And we just struck up as we got to know each other, there was we are both rabbit hole dwellers, and there was very few rabbit holes that we hadn't gone down, and we could both talk about various subjects without each other getting irritated or mad at the other one. And so it was just a wonderful friendship. We both love the art of conversation, and so many conversations about many things. And we just realized that again, there's a lot of truth in lots of things. No one thought process. I think we both agree. No one thought process has it all correct. So we take bits and pieces of what resonates with us, and we put it all together. And that's what the Red Pill Revolution book became, was just an attempt to help our fellow humans go through this playing field we call life, which has gotten, I don't know if any of you have noticed, but in the last several years, it's gotten even more wacky than it previously was. And so it was an attempt to make heads or tails out of that, because you can't, we all wake up in different areas and at different levels of understanding. And when one does start to wake up and realize, oh my gosh, these politicians might be lying to me, or oh my gosh, my doctor might be lying to me, or oh my gosh, my religion isn't as accurate as I once thought it would. When you start having these big revelations, you get excited and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to learn more. I want to tell people. And Jeremy and I understand that feeling all too well. And so the book was really an attempt to go, hey, no matter where you're at, how you're at, or why you're at wherever you woke up at, there's others like you. We're there, and here's what we know to be true at this moment. And so the book was really not a finger pointing book, not a declaration of truth. It's just, here's what we know to be true, and here's how we've pieced together and tried to make sense of this wacky experience we call life on Earth. And so that's how Jeremy came into my life, and it's just been project after project after project, working on things together and trying to, again, advance the art of conversation and trying to help people in their health and wellness journey, which is, as you well know, Greg, is a lot more than just the food we put in our bodies or the medicines that we do or don't take. It's everything. There's mental things, there's light, there's water, there's grounding, there's, it's everything. And so we try to bring a reasonable balance and an easy understanding to it all.
Awesome. Dr. Jeremy, do you concur with that synopsis?
Yeah, I've heard that story told in many different ways, but not quite like that one. Yeah, I concur to a lot of stuff, but John actually met someone who I used to work with in Acapulco, who's a very competent practitioner, and he came home excitedly to Dawn and said, look, you've got to go and look this guy up. And so she did. And, the universe actually brought her to one of his interviews with me. In fact, it was the first interview I did, and I thought it was awful. But Dawn sort of poked at the screen and said, I want to talk to that one. And John was like, no, this is the chap I met at Acapulco. But that's actually how we came together. But where I certainly concur with John, and I think probably Dr. Greg, you'll understand this, is, we look at dis-ease. That's where the word truly comes from, out of harmony, imbalance. And depending on what your audience think they know or know they know, this world is a construct, as far as I can tell after 35 years of research. And where I started with my research, I didn't expect to go into all the areas that it leads you to. But when you're looking for the answers, unfortunately or fortunately, it leads you quite quickly. I'm sure you know. I'd be surprised if you don't. We're in a it's rigged. I don't know any other way to say it, but the knowledge is rigged, the education is rigged, the funnels of investment and money is rigged. And so, the more you research into things to try and help people to get well, the further it normally takes you away from the mainstream, the wackier you look. And so you end up starting to have conversations with people that you never imagined you might have 10, 20 years ago. And that's what the Red Pill Revolution was. We wrote that book with 4 other people or 3 other people because we were just fed up with people saying, how come my doctor doesn't know this? How come you're not legally protected as well as this? But, and so we had to put some pillars of how this current world is constructed so they could start to understand, all the barriers in place to A, make sure they remain sick, B, to make sure they don't find out that they're being made sick, and certainly not C, to find out how to get well. And so, of course, all kinds of conversations can come from that.
Oh, for sure. And, when you get in to see, well, these agencies are captured, and basically from the 1930s onward that was
Sure.
the kind of the plan. John, I wanted to share an anarchy quote that Utah Phillips, an old folkie, taught me, which was the definition of anarchy in his book was, well, the good people don't need your rules, and the bad people won't follow them anyways. And so there was an old folky saying with Annie DeFranco back in the day. But I thought that was just a very straightforward way. Yours was much more eloquent in unpacking that for folks. So this component, like, where do you even start with people where they say, trust the science? Why doesn't my doctor know? Where do you start there?
Yeah, I just want to laugh when anyone says trust the science, because it's an oxymoron to begin with.
Yes.
Sorry, John, but the very basis of the science is don't trust the science, attack the science and to strengthen it until we get to better science. And, and I will hand to John because I know he's champing to talk about this, but we've long lost science, and it's been replaced by corporate science with corporate interests. And actually, if you actually go and Google how do you know someone's in a cult, rather than the definition of a cult, but if you Google how do you know someone's in a cult, and now AI generates a quick list, right? If you go and look at the definitions of how do you know someone's in a cult, you'll find that science, and quite frankly, so-called modern medicine, is the very definition of being trapped in a cult. It's certainly not science unless you remove the S of science and replace it with a $sign.
Well, so many of what I will call normies, just normal people living their lives, just going about their day to day. So many people have been conditioned to think that science is this thing other than what it is. And what it is science is a discipline. Science is no different than fidelity or honesty or integrity. Science is a discipline. And it isn't a group of people. It isn't an office somewhere. It can't be. There is no office of honesty. There is no office of fidelity. There is no office of science. Again, it's a discipline. And if you are practicing honesty, then you are an honest person and your work is honest. If you are practicing fidelity, then you are, that will reflect in your relationship. If you are practicing science, then you are following the scientific principles. And science should be following the fact that it is a discipline and not an office somewhere. If I make a statement and I say it's scientifically sound, what I'm saying to the world is I can prove it to you and I can show you how you can prove it to yourself. And if you're not willing to go to that point with something, then don't use the word science, because if it is scientifically sound and I claim that something is, then I can prove it to you and I can show you how to prove it to yourself and anyone else. That is science, and not enough people understand that it's a discipline. It is not an institution.
Yeah, I love that. You know, the way I've been talking to people, it's a process actually. Like to say the science is settled is so not a scientific statement. It's never settled. Like there, you know, it's a process of inquiry and curiosity. I knew we were in trouble early on in the pandemic when you could no longer be curious. You were not allowed to ask questions. You know, anytime you get stuck in a scenario, and I can see this happening in the future as well around a lot of different topics, where you're not able to ask questions or have contrarian viewpoint. I love that you opened this up saying, like, we're bringing back the art of discussion, of inquiry, of relating.
Fundamental.
Yes.
And Greg, you touched on something that is so fundamental to this is, you know, being made to believe that we're not allowed. I'm going to focus on that word allowed.
Mhm.
The audacity. Imagine the audacity of myself, Greg, if I said, Greg, you're not allowed to have an opinion. So a lot of what happened in the nonsense of 2020, 2020 wasn't the first time that they pulled that stuff.
No.
I mean, 2020 was really just they took the AIDS beta test, because it was kind of the same cast of characters that pulled the AIDS scam, you know, back when that was going on. It was the same cast of characters that tried, and they do it every year to some extent in different parts of the world. But 2020 was really just the most bold that they ever really tried this. But a lot of it was on us, the people, who, again, Greg, the audacity of me telling you you're not allowed to have an opinion. What would you say to that? Of course, you would say, I'd imagine you'd pick a particular finger and give it right back to me, which is what
John, if
collectively
it wasn't
we
even
could have done.
it wasn't even allowed an opinion. It was Dr. Greg, you're not allowed to ask the question.
Yeah.
And that was the red flags to any thinking man or woman, that something, even if you had no idea of perhaps how corrupt the system and how financially corrupt and beneficial it is to making people sick and coming up with a quote unquote dis-ease that is at least only a pandemic by a fake test. It's not even a test, the PCR test. It never was. It's a sad thing that Karis Mullins unfortunately conveniently died at the beginning of this, the founder of that test. But you know, it is absolutely should by now, to many more people who wouldn't like to think the world was not as corrupt as it is, when doctors aren't allowed to question, scientists aren't allowed to question, and it should have been a red flag to every decent American, let alone human being, that something's not right here. What John and I do, and the people we work with, and the members we have, and so on and so forth, is we foster an environment of, that's interesting. Why would you say that? Especially if it contradicts what we believe we know. Otherwise, how on earth would we ever evolve? And probably like me, Dr. Greg, you know, I've been degrees of wrong, you could say, degrees of right through my whole career. But to get to the level of knowledge that is getting people well now, we had to let go of a lot of what we first thought was correct, or shall we say more correct. And it only keeps going if you have that environment that's interesting. Why would you say that? And of course, you know, the alleged pandemic of data, at least fake data, you know, very criminally told the world you cannot ask questions.
And again, I do think that a lot of that is on us, the people that allow, now not all of us, but too many of us just rolled over and accepted. And where I, in full disclosure, I'm 58. I was born in 1965, graduated high school in 83. So just so you know where I'm dating myself, my I'm really disappointed in, I would say, a third of my peer group, because we have never lived a single day on earth. We were literally born into a meme that corporations and politicians are dishonest, self-serving, profiteering scumbags. There's been comedians and
Shock
movies,
horror.
but like it is literally a meme. And anybody, I'll give people under the age of 30 a break, because they haven't lived through enough of these 2 to 4 year religious things we call these ceremonies we call election cycles. If you're over the age of 30 and you're still caught up in that paradigm where you see politicians and corporations, I mean, name one thing, name one vertical that politicians and corporations have looked in cameras and microphones and said, education, the environment, food. Is anything, have there been any improvements in anything? Is food healthier or cheaper? It is not. Is air cleaner? Is water free? Is any aspect of human life more self-sufficient, healthier, cheaper, easier to obtain in our life? It's not. It always gets worse. And so it's on us, the population, to the next time that this happens, we in mass have to be able to comfortably, just as any one of us in this conversation right now could very comfortably look at the other one and go, no, I'm sorry. With all due respect, no. And there's nothing wrong with saying no. And I really think if there was a silver lining in the events of 2020 forward, I hope more and more people move away from anger, because there's a lot to be angry about, but you're not going to change, you're not going to change it by getting angry, but you can change a lot of things by not giving them your time, your attention, and just saying no, just politely go no and move on with it. Because I'll be honest, again, at 58 years of age, none of these people have ever affected my life. Nobody with the last name of Bush, Clinton, Obama, Biden, Trump, none of these people have ever actually, if we think about it, have ever really affected our lives. I've never gone to my mailbox and pulled out a Trump, Obama, Biden prize or otherwise. These are media characters. They're on screens. They are not part of our actual everyday lives. And all we need to do is ignore and say no, and that's totally okay. It's totally okay. And life can continue and anger can subside. We can live a much easier, calm existence than getting
jumping on your strong agorist non-political statements there, which were just very exciting to watch as usual, John. I actually think there's a lot of positives from what we've lived through in 2020. Now, I'm not stupid. People have suffered, and as I'm sure Dr. Greg knows, we're seeing unprecedented illness and turbo cancers and what have you from the results. But at the end of the day, you have to come back to, does God exist? Is there a evil? Is there a good? Is there a right and wrong? Because what this seems to have done is backfire. If there really was a nefarious agenda other than just profiteering, and I believe there very clearly was, but even if there was just massive profiteering, it has backfired tremendously around the world's population. I've been talking on controversial subjects for decades, and I have never seen in the last 4 years so many system people. The nurses, probably like you, Dr. Go, the nurses have always talked to me, always come to me. The doctor, there were 3 doctors in my whole career. None of them did what I suggested. But now the doctors are coming to us. They're talking, and now the paramedics are coming to us and saying, look, something's really wrong, and we're seeing it now. And we're seeing it at pharmacist level. We're seeing it at many, many more people who have been harmed, who have lost someone, are seeing something incredibly is at least wrong. And I think it's a very positive. Why? Because as, again, Dr. Greg will know, since about the Flexner report and the business plan, which essentially it was to take over and destroy natural, I prefer to call it true medicine and true medicine philosophies, but to take it over and instigate basically oil-based petroleum medicine as a world business model, which is what modern medicine is, there has to be a correction. Because even if you're listening to this and thinking, no, go modern medicine, and I accept there's some wonderful things in modern medicine, but it's a small baby, shall we say, and the bath water is huge. I don't know if you know that term, the baby in the bath water.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of bath water that needs to go, and it's a small, beautiful baby, but there's not as much as people think. But I think people have to understand that if you questioning, I have to say, wherever you are in the world listening, ask yourself in the last 50 years, in your country, in your town, in your whatever, are the population healthier or sicker? And everybody knows the answer. And particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, I live in a little village in England, Dr. Greg. It's one of the most beautiful places in England. It's a tourist place. We would have maybe 1 ambulance a week, maybe 2. There's 7 to 10 a day now. And it's so obvious that something very, very wrong has occurred and something very different has occurred. And I maintain it's positive because there has to be a self-correction, because modern medicine, not necessarily the people that work in it, I don't think they know what they're in most of the time, but modern medicine was designed as a business model to make people sick and to sell drugs that are, quite frankly, the vast majority of them toxic. The great correction is coming. And I hopefully you would agree with that, Dr. Greg, that you're seeing a shift back to questioning and abandoning, so-called what I call the pharmaceutical industry.
And those pharmaceuticals, most of which are oil-based, petroleum-based products, hence why the powers that shouldn't be were the oil oligarchs, which took over what we used to call medicine, and created the allopathic system that is in place today. And the allopathic system is not, it's not that old. It's got 3 tools in its tool belt. It's going to harm. It's either going to drug you, cut you, or burn you. It's either, and that's all they got. They eliminated all of the other stuff, which would be more like preventative and kind of maintenance level practices and protocols, and they pushed that aside and labeled it quackery, and so now your average person walking around, all they know is allopathic medicine. That's all people have ever really been exposed to. They don't know that there's other, allopathic medicine is just another religion. There are other options out there, and you don't necessarily have to subscribe to the allopathic mindset to find truth.
You both talk about this degrees of awareness, like challenging the medical establishment for informed health choices. And I think, one, I want to make sure people know what that Flexner report was, because that was a pretty kind of a flag in the earth, a turning point. And then, really advocating for oneself in choice, informed health choices, and understanding that you're not getting, I think when I'm talking to people online and in the office, everybody likes choice. Everybody likes to know what their options are. And when you don't know when your options are, this can kind of lead into your East meets West philosophy as well of, that's what I call the best healthcare on the planet, is a whole continuum of care. What's best for you at this current moment? So I just kind of opened up a couple loops there. Let's see where we go with that.
Yeah, well, it's a great loop to start. I think what is really important is philosophy of what is disease, what is healing. And the allopathic model is essentially you're a bag of chemicals that have gone wrong at some point, and we just need to fix that. They don't recognize the soul. They're probably only just brushing on mental, emotional effects in manifesting disease, and they're certainly not going to venture into the old philosophies of like Chinese medicine, where essentially Chinese medicine are seeing everything as energy and energy flows and blockages of energies, and where that stagnation is found. dis-ease can manifest. If you look at that, excuse me, if you look at that from the old Greek physicians, they would look at the humors and the fluids stagnating and getting blocked, and then dis-ease manifesting. And they would look at it from a cleanliness point of view. One of my main mantras is "You're not sick, you're toxic," with TOX hyphen sick. Now, those kind of seeds planted in anybody's brain can start to really deprogram a whole history of being told that this is what causes disease, and this is what, you know this, Dr. Greg, probably your audience, we're probably preaching to the choir, but you can't be deficient in a pharmaceutical drug, but
Right.
you can be deficient in numerous nutrients. And we're at a time extraordinarily where we even have to define what food is over feed. We're at such a time of commercial, corporate control over everything that most people haven't even experienced real local food, in the very first instance. So it's where do you want to go with that? But you can understand that from a philosophical point of view. I think it's internationally famous hospital food is revolting.
Yeah.
But can there be anything more fundamental in the health of any animal than its food
Right.
source?
And
Right.
Jeremy, Jeremy has this great saying, and it's tagged onto something that I like to say a lot is, we are the only species, and this is me saying this. We are the only species that puts a paywall between ourselves and water, which is we are all life forms are dependent upon water. We're the only species on Earth that I'm aware of that puts a paywall between itself and water. Birds don't do it. Insects don't do it. Dogs, cats,
Right.
no other species does that. But Jeremy takes that one step further, and I think that this is another little brilliant seed is humans are the only species we're aware of that doesn't instinctively know what to eat. Think about that.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to get controversial, you could, in my experience of doing lots of podcasts, I could talk about all kind of what would be reviewed rabbit hole or red pill subjects from the darkest things. I'd get less negative comments than when you start talking about what we're meant to eat. It just
Right.
seems to be. I mean, I know why it's triggering because and you know what, Dr. Greg, it's the oddest thing, and I don't know where you sit with this, and we can talk about things more than food, but it seems to me that a lot of people have worked out, that not to trust the governments around the world, to essentially do the opposite of what they advise. But when it comes to dietary advice, most of them seem to have accepted that they're telling the truth. And in my experience, and I was trained also as a naturopath, which was really coming from the Seventh-day Adventists, which was vegetables and grains. And as you probably know, the Seventh-day Adventists, and they haven't hidden it, they're the second or third biggest grain or cereal producer in the world, and I think the second biggest educator. They tend to believe that meat is very bad for you and fosters carnal desires, and so they've not hidden it. In fact, Dr. Kellogg of Kellogg's cornflakes, I call them Hornflakes actually, but Dr. Kellogg was the typesetter at 12 years old for Ellen G. White, who was the main prolific author of the Seventh-day Adventist information. He was very impressed or altered by her works, and that's why he went on to have his sanatoriums and do the procedures that he did. But it turns out when you start to look at what we're designed to eat, most definitely we are designed to eat fatty meat and animal products. And when you say that, a barrage of comments usually follows that can be quite harsh at times, to say the least.
Are you suggesting, Jeremy, that there are some opinionated vegans out there?
Well, no, I don't like to segregate at all, but I have the clients come to me from all over the world that are carnivores that are sick. I have certainly plant-based that are sick. I do not believe we are designed to eat plants, as controversial as that may be to your ears. today. In fact, we can eat plants, but we have a great difficulty at digesting them. And then the reality of how much nutrients we absorb is much reduced. But I certainly have a lot of plant-based people coming to me that have become very sick. But if food was the only determining factor of what makes people, disease, we'd just say, hey, go off and eat this and come back and tell me when you're well and give me a testimonial. But as you know, it is far more. It is electromagnetic frequencies and radiation that are literally draining your voltage. It is artificial light and artificial light flickering through the sensors of the skin and eyes, telling the body to fire off hormones and do other processes at the wrong time because we weren't exposed to artificial light 100 or 200 years ago. It is belief systems. It is being in a state of fight or flight so that physiologically you can't digest properly in the first. We could go on and on and on, but I know I'm preaching to the choir. It is dis-ease. And that is how all problems need to be looked at. Hence why we encourage a conversation, especially if it upsets or challenges you.
I love it. Diet is loaded. I'm a librarian at heart, and I worked in the naturopathic school in Portland, Oregon, in the library, in the rare book room. And there's like 5 columns of diet books through time. And, from breatharian to all you name it, they're on the shelf. And it's kind of silly. We've been on the planet this long, and it's still, there's controversy. It's interesting.
Well, again, go back to like Jeremy, his statement about, we are the only species that doesn't instinctively know what to eat. And I mean, and it's so simple, but if you really marinate on that thought, it's essential that we en masse understand that, because and tied to that, the difference between food and feed. I've got two young sons, and I say to them all the time, what you eat today? And if one of them was, like rattles off what he ate, I was like, well, you had feed, but you didn't have any food. And
Right.
and they get it. It's the difference between, I mean, if I'm a dog lover, and my dogs, I've got 2 beautiful, I've got a German Shepherd and a Husky, and I've tried my best to give them the most natural existence that I can give a dog. And they eat meat, and they drink clean water, and they spend their time outside on the ground in the sun, digging holes and chasing animals and doing things that dogs do. But if I gave them, grain-based treats all the
Right.
time,
But John, that's science-based diets.
they wouldn't. They literally brand name. But they obviously would not be as healthy as they are. And then I've yet to have an animal that hasn't made it to its mid-20s. I mean, cats or dogs. I've had dog. And it's because I don't shoot them up full of chemicals. I allow them to eat what they naturally would eat. A dog or a cat is going to eat meat. If left to its natural inclination,
Instinct.
it is
Right.
not going to go up and eat, basil or corn or tomatoes. It's not sweet potatoes. I've seen sweet potatoes in dog food and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it's like, they're not going to do that. They're going to eat rabbits and squirrels. And so understanding the difference between food and feed, and understanding that we don't instinctively know what to eat, and we need to start listening. One thing I've gotten very, very good at over the years is listening to my body, and my body tells me what it wants and what it doesn't want. And I can tell literally sometimes within seconds of drinking something or eating something if my body's going to accept it. And I don't think enough of us listen. I think enough of us are so toxic because of our lifestyle choices that our bodies can't tell us the difference between a crappy fast food hamburger or a wonderful grass-fed, locally raised steak.
Yeah. I love it. Well, you guys, this has been a fascinating discussion here today, and I gotta cut us a little bit short. We can find you at naturallybetter4u.com. I'm going to put that in the show notes. You've got some gifts for our listeners and viewers. Folks, if you got something out of today's show, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a 5-star review out there on your favorite platform, and put out there, what is a takeaway? What are you going to get into action on? It could save a life. Coming at you from us to you. Thank you. We wouldn't be doing it without you. Everybody, what the health? We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.